Of course, my friends, now close your eyes and imagine we're facing one of the first great battles in history. We stretch from the vast lands of Egypt, nourished by the waters of the Nile, to the rising Hittite Empire in the north. Two great powers, two ambitious rulers, and at the center, shining with all its intensity, Kadesh. The young and ambitious pharaoh Ramses II seeks to prove his power and carve his name into history, inspired by the shores of the Nile and the support of his people. On the other side stands the wise Hittite king, Muwatalli II, determined to protect his lands and intent on reining in Ramses' ambition. Both know this conflict will determine not just the fate of two armies, but the fate of two great civilizations. Kadesh isn't just an ordinary city, it's a strategic treasure located at the crossroads of trade routes, right in the middle of east and west, north and south. The one who rules this land will not only secure his own throne, but also become the new symbol of power throughout the region. As we step closer to this battle, feel the plans and military strategies of Ramses and Muwatalli, their hearts beating with the hope of victory. Because this isn't just a power struggle, it's an epic that will leave its mark on the ancient world. Get ready, my friends, because today I'm reopening the dusty pages of our ancient past. You're invited on a journey filled with history and heroism. My friends, let me take you back to a time long before the red sands of Kadesh. Imagine an empire rising in the lands of Egypt, flourishing with the bounty of the Nile. This civilization, watching the sunrise at dawn, shines like the center of the world, with its temples rising in the deserts, sacred prayers dedicated to the gods, and the most magnificent pharaohs. This is the golden age of the new kingdom. Egypt is not just the most powerful empire in Africa, but in all of the Near East. And it is during this time that Egypt's pharaohs begin to expand their lands not only to the south, but also to the north and east. Ramses' ancestors achieved great victories, pushing the empire's borders all the way to the Levant. With each victory, gratitude prayers rise in Egypt's temples, and the pharaohs declare themselves as the earthly shadows of the gods. While Egypt increases its cultural and military power, it also strengthens the belief system that unites its people. But my friends, the world was not created to nourish just one power. In the north, another great force is rising in the lands of Anatolia, the Hittite Empire. Founded by great King Hattusili I, this empire begins to rule over all of Anatolia over time. The Hittites, with their warrior spirit, strong armies, and deep understanding of diplomacy, become a respected power not just in their own lands, but throughout the Near East. Before long, they start to threaten Egypt's dominance in the region. The rise of the Hittites serves as an alarm for Egypt. By the time of Ramses II, the Hittites have become the greatest obstacle to Egypt's expansion. Especially in the Levant, in what is now Syria, conflicts between the two empires escalate. The Hittites emerge as a determined force, having taken control of the routes extending into northern Mesopotamia and intent on halting Egypt's spread to the north. At this point, an inevitable confrontation between the two great empires is near, my friends. Both sides know that whoever dominates these lands will also rule the fate of the Near East. The winds of the storm that will break in the lands of Kadesh begin to blow. As the Egyptian and Hittite empires step closer to a clash that will change the course of history, we start to better understand the backdrop of these two ancient powers. Get ready, because soon we will hear the victory cries and the cries of anguish echoing across the red sands of Kadesh. Yes, my friends, now let me take you a bit further down the dusty paths of history, toward that fierce battle where two great empires would clash. But first we need to understand why this distant, rocky and barren place called Kadesh became the stage for such a struggle. Imagine the Egyptian and Hittite empires, two massive giants with borders pressed against each other, each burning with the desire to expand their territories. Kadesh stands right in the middle of this power struggle, almost like a chess piece ruled by fate. Kadesh was not just a town, it was the gateway to power. Located in the heart of the Levant, this strategic point was at the crossroads of the paths leading to both the Egyptian army coming from the south and the Hittite forces advancing from the north. Situated in what is now Syria, Kadesh was also at the heart of trade routes due to its proximity to the Mediterranean coast. Whoever controlled Kadesh could rule both east and west. In short, Kadesh wasn't just a city, it represented a key point controlling the busiest trade routes of the Near East, symbolizing both wealth and power. That's why a mighty pharaoh like Ramses II and a clever Hittite king like Muwatalli had their eyes set on Kadesh. For years, these two empires had engaged in various conflicts in the border regions, tasting the bitter flavors of victory and defeat in the vast plains of the Levant. As Egypt expanded to the north, the Hittites strengthened their southern borders, and it seemed that almost every conflict had become a preparation for seizing Kadesh. The strategic importance of this small city grew as both ancient empires believed that power and honor would be won in Kadesh. And let's not forget, this rivalry was more than just a matter of land. Between Egypt and the Hittites lay a long-standing struggle for superiority throughout history. The pharaohs of Egypt felt that they were chosen to bring order to the world, basking in the sacred light of the sun. In their eyes, every soldier emerging from the fertile lands of the Nile fought on the battlefield by the well field. The Hittites, tempered by the harsh climate of Anatolia, were masters of war and diplomacy, gradually expanding their empire. For them, Kadesh represented an honor battle to strengthen their empire's power and resist Egypt's advances. And so, my friends, this historic enmity was destined to turn into an inevitable clash. Kadesh represented so much more than just a city. Every Egyptian and Hittite soldier marching toward Kadesh saw this fight as a battle of destiny. The emperors prepared their armies, swearing oaths to return to their lands victorious, because to possess Kadesh meant to dominate the Near East. The fates of these two giants were set to intersect right here, on the stony paths of Kadesh. Get ready, my friends, because soon we will witness the confrontation of these two armies, a moment that will be etched in history forever. My friends, let me tell you about two powerful leaders, two emperors who shaped history. On one side, we have the young and bold pharaoh Ramses II sitting on the throne of Egypt. And on the other side, the calm and wise Hittite king Muwatalli, coming from the tough lands of Anatolia. These two rulers are moving step by step toward that historic moment when fate will clash them together, each striving to protect the honor of their own empire, while seeking to change the course of history. Ramses was very young when he ascended to the throne of Egypt, but his ambition and courage were so great that he quickly won the hearts of the Egyptian people. Fueled by the fertility of the Nile, he was a leader sworn to live out the destiny bestowed upon him by the gods. In his eyes, Egypt's borders would expand, and the pharaoh's shadow would spread from the Nile to engulf the entire world. Ramses II was not just a ruler, he was almost an envoy of the gods on earth. Each of his victories would be an offering to the gods, and each success would be a source of hope for his people. To Ramses, Kadesh wasn't just a city, it was a symbol of Egypt's glory radiating across the Near East. The courage and relentless ambition he possessed at such a young age wouldn't allow him to step back, even in the challenging arena of Kadesh. But standing against him was a name ready to challenge Egypt's young lion, Muwatalli II. He was a Hittite king raised in the harsh conditions of Anatolian lands, well versed in the subtleties of war and diplomacy. Muwatalli knew how to rule with less show but great intellect. Since ascending to the Hittite throne, he had been focused on protecting his kingdom, his power, and his lands. Through the strategies he carried out alongside his brother Hattusili, he expanded Hittite territory and led his people to prosperity. For him, Kadesh wasn't just a city. This victory would be an opportunity to demonstrate Hittite strength to the world. In Muwatalli's eyes, Kadesh was a cornerstone that would shape the destiny of his empire. It would show both his people and his enemies the indomitable spirit of the Hittites. Each of these leaders was going to war not just as a commander but as a symbol representing the spirit of their people. while Ramses reflected the enthusiasm of youth and the splendor of Egypt. Muwatalli carried the deep culture, warrior spirit, and strategic wisdom of the Hittites. That's why the Battle of Kadesh would not just be a confrontation between two armies, but a reckoning between the entire past and future of two great empires. Ah, my dear friends, now I'm going to take you right into the midst of those massive armies. Back in those days, every step taken and every word spoken in the lands of Egypt and Hatti was a preparation for that clash. Two great empires, two powerful armies. The forces led by Ramses and Muwatalli were not just collections of soldiers. Every chariot carried the spirit of their nations. Every shield, every spear, every sword was like a vow, a pledge for victory or death at Kadesh. The Egyptian army was as organized as the waters of the Nile. Under Ramses' leadership, the troops were divided into units. The pharaoh knew each soldier by name and unified their loyalty with his own power. The heart of the army was the chariot corps. Egyptian chariots were renowned for their speed and agility. These lightweight, two-wheeled chariots raced across the battlefield like a storm, charging into enemy lines, retreating and striking again. Each chariot carried two warriors, one as the driver and the other as the archer. When battle commenced, these chariots would strike the enemy like lightning, changing positions with bewildering speed. Under the pharaoh's command, they waited impatiently to intimidate their foes. The rest of the army consisted of infantry, spearmen, shield bearers, and archers. In Ramses' army, every soldier had one single purpose: to embody the divine power of the pharaoh and to defend the honor of the empire. On the other hand, the Hittite army was just as fearsome as the Egyptians. Muwatalli had meticulously prepared his forces, gathering warriors from every corner of Anatolia. This army embodied the resilience of mountains, the flexibility of the wind, and the warrior spirit of the Hittites. Hittite chariots differed from those of Egypt. They were heavier and stronger, capable of carrying 3 warriors. Each chariot had one driver, one archer, and one spearman. While this might have made them slower, it also turned them into formidable, powerful units. Hittite chariots created a fearsome and well-organized wave of attacks. Muwatalli's strategy was to pounce on the enemy with overwhelming force, aiming to crush them. And so these two different army structures and strategies would soon face off in the plains of Kadesh. Ramses' tactic was to attack the enemy with speed and agility, while Muwatalli relied on heavy and crushing power. Both would unleash different storms. One would strike like a sudden hurricane, while the other would patiently grind down the foe with sheer strength. The moment of battle was fast approaching, and both armies prepared with great care. That day, Kadesh would be more than just a battlefield. It would be a test of courage and will for two great armies, two different strategies, and two leaders. So, my dear friends, as the armies readied for war, every soldier, every horse, every chariot was preparing for a great struggle, a story that would be written in history. Ah, those days, the long and grueling march that would determine the fate of Kadesh. This war was more than just a battle. It was the first recorded great conflict in history, showcasing power, strategy, and cunning. The legendary pharaoh Ramses II, with his godlike strength, gathered his army and embarked on a challenging campaign northward from the fertile lands of the Nile into what is now Syria. Ramses's military maneuvers were not merely a display of a ruler's might. They also represented an effort to rebuild Egypt's influence in the region and challenge the expanding borders of the Hittites. Can you imagine what it was like for Ramses's army to march under the conditions of that time? They walked through the scorching desert for days. Even weak soldiers in armor followed the wheel tracks of their chariots as they pushed deeper into Syria. Ramses's forces were organized into 4 major divisions: Amun, Ra, Ptah, and Seth. Each division consisted of hundreds of archers, spearmen, and enormous war chariots. They set up forward outposts to clear their paths, established camps, repaired their armor, and moved forward, always ready for battle. The goal of all this movement wasn't just to win a fight, it was to shake the very foundation of the Hittites' long expanding influence and reassert Egyptian dominance in the north. But dear friends, a war is not just about taking steps forward. The opposing force, the Hittites, was of course watching these movements closely, following Ramses's every step like a shadow. Hittite King Muwatalli had understood Ramses's intentions and was preparing a perfect trap to turn it to his advantage. His scouts and spies roamed the lands of Syria, gathering information, analyzing it, and planning to strengthen Kadesh's defenses. With a cleverly devised intelligence network, they fed Ramses false information, leading him to believe that the northern flank of Kadesh was nearly undefended. These steps taken toward Kadesh were not just a march, they were a dance of clever moves between 2 powerful leaders. On one side was Ramses's courage and the loyalty of his soldiers, and on the other was Muwatalli's intelligence and network of spies. This march had brought not only 2 armies but also 2 civilizations to the brink of a conflict that would change the course of history. And for both sides, this journey had transformed into a one-way trip with no turning back. Now let's picture that moment when Kadesh came into view on the horizon. Here we go, dear friends. The moment we've all been waiting for has finally arrived. On the vast plains of Kadesh, 2 great armies that would carve their names into history stood face to face at last. Ramses' magnificent army shone under the sun, led by the pharaohs, while before them stood the dazzling yet dangerous forces of Hittite King Muwatalli. The tension carried by the desert wind was felt in the hearts of soldiers on both sides. On one side was the pride, honor, and ambition of Egypt, and on the other was the determination of the Hittites to defend their homeland. Neither side had any thought of retreating. As the war began, Ramses positioned his army in 4 divisions. Each unit knew its mission and stood ready to move at the pharaoh's command. The first sparks of battle ignited when the Amun division clashed with the Hittite vanguard. The initial moments, filled with the sound of arrows clashing and the shivers of soldiers hiding behind their shields. This was the time for critical maneuvers that would dictate the course of the battle. Ramses planned to deploy the cavalry to strike at the Hittite flanks, believing that victory would come through these sudden and powerful attacks. But my friends, Muwatalli was not sitting idly by. It was as if he had foreseen Ramses' strategic move, positioning his heavy infantry at strategic points, ready to meet the Egyptians head-on. At this moment in the battle, the river on the outskirts of Kadesh became almost like a tactical player for both armies. The Hittites were using the river as a defensive line to repel the Egyptians' maneuvers. Muwatalli had reinforced his defenses by utilizing the river, creating a barrier to halt the advance of Ramses' divisions. As clashes intensified, chariots moved quickly back and forth, and hopes for strategic victory emerged through clouds of dust and sand for both sides. Dear friends, these first moments of battle were not just about the clash of swords and arrows, they were a test of the intelligence and strategic maneuvers of both leaders. Thus the lands of Kadesh were shaken by the echoes of a conflict that would be remembered throughout history. Here we are, dear friends, at one of those unforgettable moments. The surprise attack that would change the fate of the war. As the Egyptians advanced across the lands of Kadesh with Ramses' strategies, this sudden Hittite assault burst forth like a thunderclap. Muvatali's clever move landed an unexpected blow right at the heart of the Egyptian army. Ramses and his soldiers were forced to pull back in shock against the sudden onslaught from their enemies. The Hittite army pressed forward with all its might, quickly closing in on the Egyptian battalions. Ramses' soldiers were thrown into disarray in the face of the fearless Hittite chariots. The Hittites attacked with full force, the spears hurled from their chariots, and the thunderous war cries shattered the courage of the Egyptian troops. Muvatali's forces, moving swiftly, began to corner the Egyptian units with the threat of encirclement. It was at this crucial moment that Ramses' leadership shone through. The determination and fury in his eyes seemed to radiate with divine power. The pharaoh charged into the midst of his soldiers, bellowing his commands with a voice full of authority. In a way, he was calling upon the gods of Egypt for the sake of his entire army. In response to the assault, Ramses quickly reorganized his forces and rallied them. He emerged as a dedicated leader ready to fight. The Egyptian soldiers, inspired by Ramses' unwavering determination, regrouped and took their positions once more. Ramses' bold stance was a powerful step to thwart the Hittite. It was as if a storm was raging at the heart of the battlefield. The Hittites' advance began to slow in the face of this resolve. This sudden attack, dear friends, was etched in history as a moment that tested the strength and determination of both armies. The Egyptian forces regained their footing, thanks to their leader's steadfast belief, and took their place back on the battlefield. And thus, in the sands of Kadesh, this moment marked a time when hope for victory reshaped itself for both sides, becoming one of the most unforgettable memories of the war. All right, my friends, we've reached the most critical moment of the Battle of Kadesh, Pharaoh Ramses' legendary counterattack. At this point, Ramses entered history as a powerful leader who refused to back down, even in the face of great disaster. When he saw his soldiers breaking under the pressure of the Hittites, he acted with determination and made a decision that would engrave his name in history. As Muvatali's armies pressed the Egyptian forces, Ramses, full of confidence and faith, launched a counteroffensive. Mounted on his horse, he advanced like a god of war, aiming straight for the heart of the enemy. When he raised his sword and gave the command, his resolve reignited the spirit of the Egyptian army. This unexpected move took the Hittites by surprise, as they were already preparing to celebrate victory, believing themselves to be triumphant. In this critical moment, reinforcements from Egypt's other divisions arrived just in time. These supporting troops joined the fray, putting pressure on the Hittites. The united Egyptian army, under Ramses' command, began to push the Hittites back with tremendous force. With the arrival of these reinforcements, Ramses launched a full counterattack, turning the tide of the battle in his favor. As the enemies retreated in shock, Ramses' courage and determination inspired every soldier. So, my friends, this bold counterattack by Ramses changed the fate of the Battle of Kadesh. The rising dust and sand on the battlefield were a testament to the resolve and belief of both armies. This epic counteroffensive showcased Egypt's strength and immortalized Ramses as a legendary leader. My dear friends, at the end of this epic battle, The smoke rising over Kadesh didn't reveal who the true victor was. Because this was a complete deadlock, neither the Hittites nor the Egyptians could leave here shouting their triumphs. Both sides were exhausted, depleted, and had suffered significant losses. Ramses and Muwatalli, despite putting on a grand display of power in the midst of the fighting, found that the outcome of the war wasn't exactly what either of them had hoped for. So why did this war lead to a stalemate, you ask? Here we see that fine line where grand strategies, predictions, and tactics fall short. Although Ramses managed to push back the Hittites at the last moment with reinforcements, the strength of the Hittite army was still too great to overcome. Muwatalli's troops didn't completely withdraw from the battlefield, but they also couldn't hold all of Kadesh. In the end, this war was a struggle for power marked by the exhaustion and limited resources of both sides. When Ramses and Muwatalli recognized this deadlock at the end of the war, they decided that further bloodshed would be meaningless. After this great clash at Kadesh, what remained were destroyed villages, lost lives, and still smoldering battlefields. Ramses couldn't conquer Kadesh, nor could Muwatalli defend it entirely. This stalemate led to the war ending without a victor, paving the way for the famous Treaty of Kadesh, known as the first peace agreement in history. The scene left behind by the Battle of Kadesh meant a great deal to both the Egyptian and Hittite civilizations. After this war, Ramses and Muwatalli understood that ruling over lands was just as important as wisely establishing peace, an achievement worthy of a true leader. My dear friends, after that great battle in Kadesh, swords were sheathed one by one, the armies retreated wearily, and the smoke over the land finally began to clear. But this war left behind more than just destruction and loss. No, the legacy of Kadesh was much deeper, a legacy that would bring peace to human history. Because after this war, the first peace treaty ever recorded in history would be made between Egypt and the Hittites. Ramses and Muwatalli were both worn down by the long, exhausting conflict and the suffering of their people. At this moment, these two leaders, tired of fighting, decided to take a step that would end the war and open the door to a lasting friendship. The swords were replaced by seals, and the armies were replaced by the words of diplomats. Ramses sent an envoy to the Hittites, and Muwatalli responded in kind. These two kingdoms, once enemies on the battlefield, turned to friendly agreements at the negotiation tables. While mourning the soldiers they lost in battle and their cities turned to ruins, they also wanted to offer the peace and tranquility of a new era to their people. The details of this treaty were so powerful that they symbolized not just the interests of two states, but also the desire of two cultures to coexist in peace. The terms of the agreement were quite striking. Ramses and Muwatalli pledged to respect each other's territories and to assist one another in times of need. Both states agreed to establish a kinship to ensure the continuation of peace. The sealing of this treaty would even include marriages between the two dynasties. This treaty represented a victory that could not be won on the battlefields. It symbolized a peace achieved through mutual trust at the negotiation tables. The Battle of Kadesh, my friends, was not just a war. The true legacy of Kadesh was bringing two powerful kingdoms together, not on the battlefield, but at the table of peace. My friends, the moment we realized that the Battle of Kadesh was more than just a fight, the course of history changed. This bloody clash between Egypt and the Hittites shaped not only borders but also the minds and beliefs of the people. The blood spilled on the battlefield of Kadesh left lasting marks on human memory. as this war represented not just the power of swords but also the ambition of kings and the faith of nations. In Egypt, the traces of this war were immortalized in massive reliefs and inscriptions carved into the walls of temples. Ramses I wanted to show his people how he returned from battle as a victorious commander, blessed by the god Amun. In the temples of Luxor and Karnak, his unwavering stance against his enemies was praised, even amidst the arrows. These temples served almost like illustrated history books, showcasing how the war affected the people and how Ramses instilled confidence in them as a powerful ruler. However, the story depicted in Egypt does not just highlight the victorious side of the war, it also reflects the strong bond between the people and Egypt's protective gods. The people believed that the victory in battle was achieved under the protection of the god Amun, leading them to show even more devotion to the temples, offer more sacrifices in Amun's name, and have greater faith in his power. Thus, the Battle of Kadesh profoundly influenced Egypt's religious and cultural life, solidifying the people's loyalty to their gods. For the Hittites, the marks left by this war strengthened their trust in diplomacy, reason, and agreements. The treaty that followed this battle became a symbol of the Hittites' peaceful approach, known as the first peace treaty in history. In the eyes of the Hittites, this war demonstrated that a nation's strength could come not only from the sword but also from the power of words. Ah, my dear friends, as we journey through the dusty pages of history together, we've traveled back in time from the sandy paths of Ramses to the stone-walled castles of the Hittites. We've walked every step. Can you picture it in your minds? The magnificent stance of Ramses on the battlefield, the Hittite soldiers rising again after each blow, the booming voices lost in the thick fog of war. Today I've shared not just the story of the Battle of Kadesh, but a tale of diplomacy, culture, and humanity that goes beyond just a war. At the end of this conflict, there wasn't a victory written in blood and sweat. Instead, there was that sacred document known as the first peace treaty in history, inviting Egypt and the Hittites to peace, a voice whispering that humanity should triumph through friendship, not war. Perhaps the greatest lesson the Battle of Kadesh teaches us is this: strength is not only shown through sword and shield, it also manifests through wisdom, respect, and understanding. Now, as you sit by the fire, has this story brought you hope and insight in your own lives? If it has, know that the magic of this tale echoes from centuries ago. Next time we'll meet again here for another journey into the sea of history. Until then, may the silent wisdom of history always be with you. Remember, my friends, every story leaves a mark, and the traces we leave pave the way for future generations' enlightenment. Farewell, but always return to the shores of history.